name is Daniel Garner. I've been dead for so long it's hard to remember who I really was.
With the current generation of consoles coming to an end in the next few months, one thinks back to the amazing titles that we've been graced with this generation that it will be long remembered for. Games like Red Dead Redemption, BioShock, and the Uncharted trilogy come to mind as true standouts in their unparalleled ability to seemingly put all aspects together of what makes a game great. When generations past come to a close, even better experiences can be found as developers have time to learn the hardware and push it to its limits. This generation is no exception. This year alone, we've already had 3 tremendous blockbusters in the form of Tomb Raider, BioShock Infinite, and The Last of Us, and we are still only a little over halfway through the year. Sadly, Painkiller, Hell and Damnation fails to come even remotely close to keeping with this trend as this generation winds down and falls rather flat as a game. The game begins curiously. There's no cutscene, no text scroll, and no form of a backstory whatsoever. It drops you into a chugging, frame rate-ridden map and more or less wants you to figure it out. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. In games past, dropping you in without direction can lead to loads of exploration and an overall great gaming experience. The original Legend of Zelda comes to mind as the perfect way to accomplish this, but even they, back in the 1980s, at least provided a text scroll to explain the backstory as to who you are and what you're doing there. You find out, through really bad voice acting, that you are Daniel Garner and you are on a mission from Death, the Grim Reaper himself. 7,000 souls for your true love is the task he deals to you to be reunited with the object of your affection, Catherine. Completing the task of taking out 7,000 baddies for a chance at true happiness sounded compelling enough. I was actually pleasantly surprised with the premise, even though it was pretty shallow and lacked any real substance. I wasn't expecting much from this first-person shooter story-wise. If it had some, great. But what I was really after is some great combat against some interesting villains, and we'll get to whether or not this game accomplishes that in a bit. The controls in this game are rudimentary at best, and often feel heavy and weighed down. Now, I usually play first-person shooters with the sensitivity turned up, but usually the game recorrects and compensates by increasing sensitivity on the Y-axis, the X-axis, and your strafe. It's hard to explain, but the game never really felt right no matter where I set the sensitivity. It always seemed a bit off and heavy. But, alas, I'm a gamer, so I pushed on and eventually got as used to it as humanly possible. The graphics, of course, are another interesting, multifaceted aspect of the game. Some parts are extremely good looking, mainly the weapons, which blew me away in their creativity. The sheer amount of versatility is immediately reminiscent of an Insomniac, the makers of Ratchet and Clank and Resistance, with its vast and unique arsenal. The pure design, lighting, shading, and movements of virtually every weapon in the game are phenomenal. It's a stark contrast to the actual backgrounds and enemies, which look far less impressive. It's almost unsettling how good the weapons look compared to the rest of the scenery. They look almost out of place against an almost PS2 looking era background. As far as the actual level design goes, again, we land somewhere in the middle. The concepts behind these maps are impressive and well thought out, considering the world you're in and the enemies that you're facing. You'll frequent graveyards, tombs, and the like, but unfortunately, the poor graphics in the level leave something to be desired. I would like to make special mention of the lighting team because, to me at least, it looks like they are a really talented team who is working an uphill battle with this game. Their work does stand out quite a bit, despite the unimpressive graphics. Combat is definitely a low point in this game. When you kill an enemy, they drop a soul, which is essentially a green orb. Now this is by far the most frustrating part of the game for a couple of reasons. First is the disappearance time. These orbs barely stick around for 10 seconds apiece. This may seem like a lot of time at first, but there's never just one enemy. There's usually dozens. By the time you clear yourself of the dangerous horde, half of the orbs have already vanished. What this means is you essentially have two options. Either clear an area and deal with the fact that many orbs and souls have disappeared, or kill a handful at a time and risk running around and outmaneuvering the horde to collect said souls a few at a time. It's not an impossible feat considering how low the artificial intelligence of the enemies is, but the sheer volume of the horde makes the collection task harder than it needs to be. If you go this route, you're sure to take many hits against yourself courtesy of the horde. It's hard to truncate how mind-numbing all of this is in a few short sentences. What I found most effective was a combination of the two methods, which ultimately keeps you alive, but costs you many uncollected souls. The second maddening soul collection process is the location that the orbs are dropped. One would think where you killed the enemy would make a logical spot, but no, that would make too much sense. Instead, the drops are random and have seemingly no rhyme or reason as to why they show up where they do. The last major points I would like to address are the collectibles and the music. The collectibles are essentially religious artifacts that are hidden throughout the levels. There really aren't any backstories or points to the collectible. They're just kind of there. Also placed throughout the levels are treasure chests that are easily broken to reveal golden coins that are basically just collectibles as well. They are virtually meaningless since they cannot be redeemed for anything, like a weapon upgrade or something. Last but not least, we have music. There's really not much to say here, as it's one song on a loop throughout battles. It's a really good song. It's kind of like a heavy metal rock instrumental mix, but it's still just one song. You can only hear it so often before it begins driving you a little nuts. It almost ends up being a tell that the next fight scene has commenced even before you spot an enemy. It's actually quite reminiscent of a 1980s horror movie, where you know the killer's around the corner because of the music that begins to play. I know it may seem like this game was awful based on my review, but it really wasn't half bad. Sure, the story was a little dry and combat was a little repetitive at times, but for a gamer who's looking to mindlessly mow down some attacking undead skeletons with a shotgun, this game's for you. The point is that while this game probably won't win any Game of the Year awards, there's still some good things that can be taken from it. Interesting weapon designs, captivating level settings, and of course, the task at hand of being Death's Soul Collector, just to name a few. If this was a $60 full retail game, I'd probably issue it a 5.5 out of 10. But luckily, this game is coming out at a budget-friendly price of $30. And taking that into consideration, I will bump the game's overall score to a 6 out of 10. There's fun to be had, but you have to pay the admission in the form of repetitive enemies and music to get it.